Hello everybody, and welcome to this session on value-driven planning and its impact on low-code platforms. So first, by way of introductions, my name is Andrew Davis. I'm the Senior Director of Methodology and Training at Copado, also author of the book Mastering Salesforce DevOps. So what I wanted to do today is just set a little bit of a foundation talking about low-code platforms for software development, like Salesforce as a great example. Some of the benefits and business outcomes that can come from using these low-code platforms, but in particular, how the way that you use these platforms, in particular the way your team works together through planning as the first foundational aspect of the software delivery process, is critical to get the most value out of low-code platforms, or in fact any other system you choose to develop on. I'm going to talk about the key activities and business outcomes you need to accomplish, and then really do a deep dive on some aspects of planning. So, first of all, I want to level set low-code systems. It's a popular term, but you may not be super clear on what it means. It means a modern approach to software development that requires little or no computer coding. So you're actually developing custom software applications, but not by writing code. And this depends upon tools like Salesforce and so forth that allow you drag and drop way to design user interfaces, way to design the data model, ways to design logic, business logic, and so forth. It's called low code because you can supplement it with some degree of code, but typically much less than in a custom coded application. So Gartner had estimated that by 2025, 70% of new business applications built in by enterprises would be using low or no code technologies. And that is a substantial growth from just 5 or 10 years ago. And so part of the reason for this is because these platforms are powerful. They allow you to build applications more quickly than you'd be able to do otherwise. But another reason, a little bit more subtle, it's because it closes the gap between the teams that are actually planning the work and the teams that are doing the work. Because having these visual user interfaces, visual, logic or flow designers and so forth, they don't require such a deeply specialized skill set. So you can have people who are subject matter specialists actually designing some of their own apps, or at least reviewing it and having much more clarity on whether the application's on track or not. And that is the planning aspect that we're going to dig into a bit more in this session. So because of the growth in capabilities in these low-code platforms, I started working on Salesforce almost 15 years ago. And even in that time, the capabilities have grown enormously. And because the capabilities of these low-code platforms and the increased need to develop applications very quickly and how widespread these platforms are, there's a huge wave coming. There's a wave of increasing low-code development that is already upon us, really, but just going to grow in future years. The teams that build on these platforms maybe have less technical skill than custom-coded application teams, but nevertheless, they're able to move more quickly. But some of the challenge is that they, over time, begin to encounter the exact same kinds of challenges that traditional software development teams encounter. If your application is very simple, it's not a problem, right? But as it grows and grows and grows, you get increasing complexity, a lot of interaction between different components. You have a lot of manual processes. Even though the low-code platform itself may be easy to design an application with, aspects of your development process may be very manual. That's where Copado is primarily involved, trying to help automate and ease and coordinate the whole development process. And this coordination problem, the communication problem across teams, as you start getting more than just one or two people building these applications, you start getting 5, 10, 15, 20, 50, 100, 300 people building together. The coordination issues become the primary determinant of whether you're able to build efficiently and effectively or not. So the question is then, if you're building on these low-code platforms, or indeed on any system, how do you ensure that teams are delivering the most value in the shortest time? Why is this important? Of course, the teams naturally, there's a cost to employing these people, to engaging consultants and so forth. So you want to try to balance the cost that you're investing with the value that you're getting out of the team. So often in the DevOps community, and that's a lot of my area of specialization is DevOps and automating the software delivery process, we often talk about these three kinds of business outcomes: speed, innovation, and quality. And speed often means time to market, time to value, how quickly you can build things, of course, also how quickly you can run them. Innovation, though, is what we'll double down on here in this session, where we talk about, are you actually building something that is new and valuable? Typically things that are new are more valuable because nobody else has them, right? So novelty and innovation tends to couple tightly with value. And quality Does the application that you're building meet the needs of the users? Is it reliable? Is it secure? Is it performant? All of these are aspects of quality. Down below, you see these four now somewhat famous metrics, the DORA metrics: deployment frequency, lead time for change, change failure rate, and time to recover. These are often used as DevOps metrics, like how quickly can a team roll out changes, or how quickly can they roll them back if there's a problem. These primarily deal with the topics of speed and quality, and we'll talk about that a little bit in this talk, but primarily we're going to focus on the central outcome, innovation. And innovation, really hard to get metrics on that. It's a very qualitative issue, and a lot has to do with planning. So when you talk about DevOps, and DevOps, if you're not familiar, it's sometimes described as the technical components of being agile. So often people think about agile in terms of sprints and user stories and scrum teams and so forth. DevOps is also part of agile. It's the technical capabilities, making sure you're able to ease and automate the development process, ease and automate your operational systems, your infrastructure as much as possible. And in particular, you coordinate these two teams together. Dev and ops, for example, coordinating together, testing and development, compliance and planning, whatever are the different groups, whatever the different silos that might arise in a development process. DevOps is all about unifying those and breaking down these silos. Now, when we talk about DevOps, although it's an iterative process, you see all these different aspects: plan, code, build, test, and so forth. Planning is first part in the process. Planning is developing an idea, developing a vision, developing a wish. You can only build something once you've got a wish to have that, or some vision of what it is you want to build. So the foundation for DevOps, foundation for Agile, foundation for effective software development in any context remains thoughtful planning. So just to double down on this, there is a framework called Lean that many people are familiar with. Lean is a huge influence and component in the DevOps movement. And Lean is often summarized as having these 5 aspects or 5 components. But the first of these is precisely specify value for the customer that you're delivering to. Precisely specify value by product or by the application that you're developing. So if you can't specify the value, can't specify the customer and so forth, you can't get started on this lean journey. You can't get started on a DevOps journey, on an agile journey. It has to start with identifying value. So often when you think about this process of identifying value, one framework that's useful is thinking about the current state, understanding the current state, and then imagining or defining a future state. Obviously, there's a gap between those two, and that's where you have to begin to assess the amount of work that it would take to get from your current state to a future state, maybe a modest goal, maybe an incredibly aspirational goal. There will be some work between your current state and your future state. Now, Agile really is about beginning to deliver an initial future state version very quickly, but refining that future state and doing that again and again and again, iteratively, typically, before you finalize that future state, because often people don't know what they want until they actually see it in front of them. That's one aspect of that. And we also don't know what we're building, what we're going to be getting into, until we actually put it in the hands of the users and we begin to see that they have problems we didn't anticipate, things are beneficial that we didn't anticipate would be beneficial, and so forth. So there's a variety of activities that are very useful, often used by business analysts to try to draw out these needs, figure out the current state and the future state you want to get to. These are things like discovery workshops, clarifying the features and applications, and trying to imagine or specify value for those features and applications, either qualitatively or quantitatively. And then beginning to get into these activities of like creating releases and sprints, defining epics and user stories. All of this is part of the planning process, breaking work down. We're going to get into this in a little bit more detail here in the rest of the session. But I want to start with this one foundational concept. And I often am struck by how much variation there is across software development teams, and often, development teams don't necessarily spend a lot of time getting, especially in the low-code world, a lot of the developers in the low-code world have come in from other areas of the business, subject matter specialists and so forth. They don't necessarily have a deep background in software development. But there's one concept that's incredibly common, and importantly so, and that is user stories. So when we talk about a user story, it typically means discrete unit of work. And the terminology is really important. It's a user story. So it is a story that is imagined from the point of view of the user. And so it has these 3 aspects. If you see on the left-hand column, the who as a, for example, support agent, The what, I want to be able to quickly see all of the cases that I've worked on recently in the last week. Why? So that business value, so that I can have a sense about how quickly am I closing cases and remember any issues that I might need to follow up on, for example. And that three-part aspect, the who, the what, and the why, is the story description. That's the essential aspect of a story. Now, the story always, there's a protagonist. That's like one of the qualities of a story, right? That's the who part. They're always trying to do something, but there's always some driving purpose, the why. And the why is actually the business value aspect. And sometimes if teams are, not accustomed to this process, they may kind of rush through and not really state the why behind an issue. But what that does, it interferes with the ability both of the people who are developing the story and also the people who are using it, and also anybody who's trying to promote the value of this work. It undermines their ability to talk about it and to be creative in terms of resolving it. So when I mentioned that support agent case, I want to be able to see my recent cases to see if there's any that I need to follow up on and see how much work I've accomplished. Now, if you understand that that's the purpose, that's the goal, then you might be able to envision there's different ways to accomplish that. So maybe instead of seeing a list of all the recent cases, maybe there's just a way to flag a certain case as needs follow-up. Maybe that would accomplish the goal of being able to follow up on important cases later in the week. Or if the goal is just tracking measurements, maybe you don't really want to see the number of cases you've closed. Maybe you just want a metric, right? You've closed 10 cases today, 30 cases this week. Maybe that's what's most valuable to you. And so the why allows the business analyst or whoever's doing the planning to dig a little bit deeper behind what's the underlying motivation behind this. So you see the bottom here, this formula, story description, the who, what, and why, plus the acceptance criteria. And typically these allow you to specify in a little bit more detail what you really want. I want a clear, clean list of the cases that I've worked on last week. I want it to be visible from this screen. I want it to always be updated with the latest cases and so forth. Whatever are the details that need to be specified, those go in the acceptance criteria. And together, these create a story that is understandable, estimatable, and verifiable, by which we mean understandable means even if somebody's not worked with support agents before, they can understand the meaning and the purpose of what you're trying to convey. And that's important because you might have to hand this piece of work off from the customer to a business analyst to a developer to a tester to a release manager. They need to have this kind of clear understanding. Understandable, estimatable, which means you can take a rough estimate of how much time this is likely to take, and that will require you to involve the technical specialists, of course, and then verifiable. And this is especially where the testers and the user acceptance testing team and so forth comes in, because they need to be able to verify that the developer, for example, did in fact build the thing that they were supposed to build. So you can see the user story, you can see what was built by the developer, and you can say, I verify you seem to have met the requirements. So maybe this is very familiar to you, but just in case, I wanted to level set on user stories. Now, when we talk about user stories, we can think of them from 2 points of view. The functional perspective, and you see at the top here, this product manager kind of looking from the top down, the functional specifications for something. And then on the right, you see the architect and the tech lead in this diagram, and they're looking at the specifications from a technical point of view. And any user story will typically have both of these angles. The functional angle is, what does this do? Why do I need it? What are some of the details, the nuances about what it does and how I should expect it to work? Now, the technical specifications are very important, and that's a big part of what needs to go into making a story estimatable, estimating the amount of work that's required, because you need to look at that piece of work with the skilled eye of people who know how to build similar applications, have hopefully built similar applications in the past, know the system that you're working on and so forth, so that they'll know, is this going to be very easy to accomplish? Is this going to be very difficult to accomplish? How many things are we going to have to change? Are there certain specialist skills that we'll need to execute this particular piece of work? You can see, even on one user story, it has these two lenses you can look at it through, but also you see the diagrams here. Each story can be broken into subtasks, and the subtasks represent smaller parts of work that need to be done as part of this piece of work. The story itself, there may be multiple stories that form one feature, one characteristic of the application that you want to build. And you may organize your work into epics, large collections of stories. So features are more about the qualities and characteristics of the application you're building, and epics are like a vast collection of stories, multiple stories together, like the Odyssey and the Iliad, these famous epic stories. Now, once you've defined these user stories, it becomes critically important to begin to plan and sequence the way that the team is going to work. And so what you see here on the left is kind of an unprioritized product backlog, just a bunch of features that you've identified that you need or want to work on. On the right, you see a prioritized product backlog where you've lifted the stories that are highest priority to the top. So maybe feature 4 is the highest priority, feature 7 is the lowest priority, you move to the bottom. There are here, of course, multiple different ways of thinking about this and estimating this. Scaled Agile framework promotes something called the weighted shortest job first. So typically you want to try to do these short, quick jobs, especially if they're really important. So you have something that's very important to do and very quick to do. You should do that before something that's very important to do and difficult to do, right? So if you have two very important things, do the shorter, quicker one first. Get it done, get it out there. And that's part of value-driven planning, because the story doesn't bring any value until it's out there. So get it done, get it out there, get it bringing value quickly, right? There are also concepts like cost of delay divided by duration. That's a nice framework that I like. But one way or another, you need to figure out what you're going to do first. One other way that I'll mention to think about the prioritization is through the lens of what's called optionality. So if putting one component in place gives you then the ability to do lots of other things, that makes that one component very, very valuable. And so sometimes the things that are hidden deeper in the architecture that are not even user-facing may be incredibly powerful. We talk about low-code platforms moving to a low-code platform like Salesforce, for example. That's an architectural decision. It doesn't immediately benefit the end users, but it gives you a lot of optionality because it's a platform that allows you to perhaps move more quickly than you would otherwise have been able to. So now, when we talk about planning is the front-end side of things, but it needs to be coupled with monitoring. That's the back end side of things. So funny cartoon, our new dashboard has all the different KPIs we can track now. Somebody points out in that bottom right, what's that KPI that's trending towards 0? It measures how well we understand them all, right? Analytics dashboards, they're not of value unless they're used by people, and they won't be used if they're overwhelming. But so you need to think about analytics in a way that's moderate and intelligible. For example, looking at metrics tied to actual business-facing value. So this dashboard in the upper left, just a sample, but it shows things like storefront users. So that's not just a technical metric. That's something that is incredibly valuable to the organization. Revenue by hour, activity by application. You can see some of these dashboards. They're very targeted dashboards that are really trying to help you get a sense of, did the work that you did actually deliver the value you're expecting? So it's one thing to plan things on the front end and say, oh, I think this is going to be most valuable. But unless you actually monitor and see if it's working, it's not going to deliver the value you need. So if you want to find out more, you can check out a lot of these resources like the DevOps Institute, the VSM Consortium, the book Mastering Salesforce DevOps that I wrote, Copado Community, Trailhead, lots of good resources to learn more. But thank you very much. Really appreciate your interest and happy to hear any questions you might have later. Thank you so much. Take care.